Hello and welcome. In this video, we will be looking at consumer driven contract testing, or also known as CDC. So, our agenda is first, we will try to have a very high level understanding of what is contract testing, why is it called consumer driven contract testing or CDC testing, and last but not least, we'll do a little workshop where we will try to implement CDCs using Spring Framework. Okay, so first of all, let's just try to understand what is CDC and why do you need it. Let's assume you have an application, okay, where you have a producer which is kind of creating some data and producing some data. So every time consumer invokes a web service, producer gonna give you the data. Okay, all is well. Now the problem can happen is that producer might change the structure of the payload, or they might kind of change the shape of the URI. Okay, they might kind of introduce a new context path, or as far as payload is concerned, they might change a few fields. Now the problem here is, as far as producer is concerned, they may have their own internal unit testing or their own internal kind of testing framework, where they might not even realize that they have already broken something at the consumer end as soon as they have kind of introduced a new field. Okay, or they have probably changed an existing field. This is where comes consumer driven contract testing. Okay, as the name is suggesting, what's going to happen over here is consumer is going to enforce some sort of contract which producer side must kind of fulfill all the time. Okay, sounds interesting, sounds complicated. It is bit complicated, but we will look at the framework, okay, which will kind of which will make our life bit easier, and we'll be able to implement it. Not only you will be able to kind of specify as a consumer, and you'll be able to tell producer that next time whenever you release your service, please test it against my contract and make sure everything is working. Okay, you can have one contract or you can have 20 contracts, does not really matter. And the contracts can be given by various consumer applications as well. Okay, let's say you have public facing application and you have several consumers. Each consumer can specify that this is my contract and you need to fulfill it all the time. If you are breaking something, you need to make me aware, you need to tell me in advance, so I can kind of prepare myself to take those changes. Make sense? Not only we will be able to kind of enforce contract. Don't you think it will be also nice that, okay, if producer side can give me some sort of kind of stub implementation, so I can quickly take their API on consumer side, I can also quickly run it. I what I mean by quickly run it, I don't have to kind of set up the whole kind of the integration framework, and then I have to spend a lot of time deploying the producer side application and then run it to get the feedback. Wouldn't it be nice, as soon as I change the version of my producer API, or however you're consuming, let's assume for a second I'm consuming through Maven or Gradle or something. Wouldn't it be nice if my producer can also provide some sort of stub implementation, which I can just consume it, and the stub server can run, and then as my unit test or my internal integration test, I can test my stuff against that stub implementation or stub server, which can be a wire mock, or however producer want to do it. So we'll also try to see that how can we implement a stub from a producer side, give it to our consumer so they can have a very quick feedback. So as you can see now, the feedback loop is kind of full 360 degrees. Okay, producer giving us some data over here, consumer first time consuming it, but now consumer is enforcing the contract. Every time producer makes some changes, producer will be running their unit test, integration test, whatever test against these contracts. Once producer is kind of has made sure that they have not broken anything, not only they'll be kind of giving the new set of APIs, they'll be probably giving us the stub as well. And stub means like, no, you'll be able to kind of run the stub server very quickly inside your application before you, as I said earlier, that before you start kind of building or deploying the entire producer application, which can be time consuming and costly, depending like, how do you do that. All right, so I hope you have a fair amount of understanding what is consumer driven contract testing, and why do you need it. Okay, so let's directly jump to our code. Okay, and let's try to kind of implement everything. So there will be three steps, like, no, first of all, we'll be first testing. You have a producer giving me the API, then consumer side, like, we'll see like, what happens if producer breaks it. After that, we'll start, step by step, start implementing the contract, run the test against the contracts, and then we'll try to generate the stub, try to consume the stub on the consumer side. A lot to go, so please just stay with me. Okay, if you are following and want to kind of code as we go along, pause the video, take the time to kind of make those code changes, and then just follow step by step. Okay, otherwise you can download my code later and then just play offline. All right, let's just go to IntelliJ. So what I have done, this for just for this tutorial, I have said that I have an application called provider. I have an application called consumer. They are both like Spring Boot application. They don't have to. Okay, your provider can be maybe Spring Boot application. Your consumer can be application written in another language, as long as you can probably consume or provide contracts, etc. Okay. Um, so my provider is a Spring Boot application, and what this application is doing, basically, it has a very simple service, and this service gives me detail about some order. It has order ID, it has item name, it has a price, it has units. Okay, so if I start my server right now and then try to consume it, everything should be fine. Okay, so I hope you can see my IntelliJ. So I have this provider application. I'm gonna start it. Okay, it's going to start on port 8080. All good at this point. Now, on my consumer side, what I have done, I have written a very simple unit test. What it's simply doing is like, it's like an integration test, right? It's going to kind of invoke this assuming that the provider application has either been deployed to some environment, or it's running locally, or whatever. I'm just going to invoke the URI, and I'm just going to kind of run some tests quickly, saying I'm expecting this field, and I'm expecting this data. Is it there or not? Okay, so let's just try to run our unit test really quickly and see. So this is like a what we call typically happy paths scenario. Okay, so everything is kind of happy, running. My test should be passing perfect. So this is our happy path scenario. I have made sure I get the order ID, I'm able to invoke the URI, etc, etc. Okay, now let's stop everything, come back to our provider. Okay, now just assume for a second there is a need that our provider wanna call this thing like order ID. Maybe I don't know why they will do that, but probably let's say they wanna call it just ID, hypothetically. Okay, if if I compile the code, if I run my unit test, it might fail, but I'll be really able to change it really quickly on the provider side and ship the new code to okay. And what's going to happen at this point is I have not communicated with my consumer, plus I have not verified in any shape or form what will be the impact of this particular change, right? Because I don't have a visibility what are all the consumers, what they are doing with my service, how they are consuming it, and what will happen if I change my field. It's a very tiny change, as you noticed, but the change is really major because consumer is not aware of it. Let's start it. Okay, so I'm going to my provider application. Once again, let's say I have, as a provider, I have published these changes, and it was maybe some sort of public API. Let's see what happens. Now, if I try to run my test one more time, what will happen? This is unhappy path scenario, as we call it sometimes. Boom, it failed. Why it failed? It's saying I was expecting order ID with some sort of data one, but it is null. I am not happy. Now what we have done as a provider, I have broken my contract. I have broken my consumer side of consumer's business, basically. Very, very bad. This is where comes consumer driven contract testing. The name, I hope, now makes perfect sense, right? Now as a consumer, I want to enforce my contract, saying, hang on, my contract was this, you need to fulfill it all the time. If you're not fulfilling it, you need to inform it to me. Make sense? Now let's step one, what we will do, let's stop everything. Okay, we don't need to start anything. So as a step one for contract testing is, I'm just going to go to my provider. I am going to add this particular dependency called org Spring Framework Cloud. Yes, there is a framework or library set of library provided by Spring Cloud, is called CDC or Spring Cloud Contract. All right, and that's the framework we are going to use to implement CDC in our application. Because good news for us is it's a Spring application, so Spring is giving us this library, Spring Cloud Contract. Really good. There is also another open source framework called Pact, okay, which does more or less same thing, but I like this better. I think it goes really well with my Spring Boot application. Okay, but if you are interested in Pact, have a look at another tutorial. But for now, we will just continue implementing everything using Spring Cloud Contract. All right, so this is the group ID you need to add, and then you need to add kind of this artifact called Spring Cloud Starter Contract Verifier. As the name suggests, I'm going to do something which will be verifying the contract. Okay, so this is the step number one you need to do. The step number two you need to do over here is, in the plugin section, we will have to add a plugin. What this plugin will do, basically, this plugin will look at the contract, will generate some unit tests, and then automatically it's gonna verify those contracts against our service. Everything is going to happen automatically. You just need to kind of configure things properly. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to put this plugin which is given by Spring, and this is what you need to do. Okay, again, you don't need to really remember everything, as long as you know the workflow, okay, that what we are doing. So this is the plugin. I'm gonna minimize this thing, okay, so we can have a little bit of more space. I hope everything is kind of visible. So this is the plugin you want to add under plugins section. So in this plugin, let's just follow what's really going on. This is a Maven plugin, okay, and whatever the version, I am kind of using 3.0.3 at the time of recording. Okay, testing framework, I'm just saying I'm using JUnit 5. There is one important thing you need to remember. You need to add something called base class for tests. What is base class for tests? We will be adding a base class, which is going to be an abstract class. In that class, basically, we just need to tell this framework that how to basically invoke a service or services. Okay, so next time when I'm doing the unit testing or some sort of internal integration testing, this framework knows which service, which controller, whatever REST controller, etc., to invoke. All right, so and after that we will be writing our actual contract. So let's just first try to build this CDC base class. So what I have done for this tutorial, I have actually written this base class. So you can again pause your video over here, just kind of write these bunch of lines, or just go to the GitHub repo where I have kind of uploaded everything, and you'll be able to download and just carry on. So let's just see what's going on over here. So I'm simply saying, this is my Spring Boot test. Okay, this is the provider application. This is how you write the Spring test. Yeah, public abstract class, whatever name you want to give. Okay, it doesn't matter. I have just given because it's kind of more readable. I'm saying this is a consumer driven contract. This is my base class. This base class, we just have to write once. After that, Spring Cloud Contract Framework is just going to use it automatically for all the contracts. Okay, so you just simply say, this is my kind of REST controller. This is my service, and then this is the important bit. Okay, the setup. In setup, we are saying REST assured mock MVC standalone setup. You pass your controller, and then you're simply saying like, no, every time somebody calls the service, okay, I just want to kind of return this stubbed object. That's about it. So we have done three things over here if you followed me. First, we added dependency. Second, we added plugin. Third, we have added our base class. Okay, and the base class needs to match over here along with the full package com sagu cdc dot blah blah blah. Okay, you're with me up to here. Now, fourth thing, now we have to write a contract which is given by my consumer. So what is contract? Contract is basically, as a consumer, you're now telling the provider that, okay, you have earlier told me that the URI is going to look like this. This will be the method, and this will be the payload or the shape of the data you're going to give me every time I invoke your service. Make sense? So let's just come over here. What we will do, in the src test folder, go to resources. Okay, you can create a contract file over here, or you can just kind of create a package, so it's kind of easier to follow. So what we will do over here, we will create a Groovy file. Okay, let's call it Groovy class, and we just call it order contract for, I don't know, client one. That's it. Okay, dot Groovy. This is not a valid Groovy qualified name. Okay, because it's not gonna probably like dashes. Let's see if it likes this. I'm not a Groovy developer. There we are. All right, so I have my file called order contract for client number one.groovy. This is a nice way of kind of organizing your contracts. You can create folders by client, or you can put the name of your client in the file, so this contract belongs to some XYZ client. All right, makes sense. Now in the in the contract, what we're going to do basically, okay, so I have this package called contract. I need to import a class called contract in my package. Okay, so there we are. So we're gonna import org spring framework cloud contract spec contract. So this is the specification or spec for my contract. Okay, what we need to do over here at this point is we're gonna get rid of this. Okay, let's just say contract dot make. Okay, and let's just put curly braces. Perfect. So this is kind of boilerplate I have written so far. Now I will start writing the actual contract. So first thing you would like to do is you're gonna say description, give some nice description to it. Okay, just say client one, some version one contract. Okay, and maybe it was given on some XYZ date. Whatever description is easier for you. Okay, now the second thing we need to do is we need to specify what is my request looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna say request, and I will be saying URL needs to be /orders/1. Okay, and that's basically representing your REST controller. Okay, whatever that is. In our case, it's orders/1. One is just for testing purposes. Okay, this is the order ID. The second thing we need to do, what happens in the RESTful web services, method name is very, very important. Okay, so I'm simply going to say method you're supporting for this web service is called get. Perfect. Okay, let's close this thing. Now next thing you're gonna say is what is the response. So we have to say basically response needs to look something like this. Okay, status going to be Okay, where is my keyboard? Okay, so status, I'm expecting status. Okay, if suppose you have some headers, you should be able to say whatever your header. I'm simply going to say the content type is some sort of I don't know, maybe application JSON. Okay, application JSON. There it is. Perfect. Okay, so my header is done. So my status is done. My header is done. The last but not least, the most important thing is coming body. Okay, so we're gonna say this is where you have to specify how your body looks like. So basically, say for example, I now this is what I'm expecting. Okay, so we just have to say how your body looks like, i.e., the JSON which you need to send. All right. So my client is expecting order ID, okay, and it's expecting item name, whatever price, whatever. Now that's the only thing we have to do. If I run if I try to compile my provider, it's gonna fail. Why is going to fail? Because if you notice, originally when we kind of given our contract to our consumer, we said there will be order ID, but if you remember, we have already changed to order ID. So that's I think great test already we can see. Now let's just go to our console. Okay, where are we? Simply I'm gonna say service provider. Okay, let's just try to kind of say Maven clean and install. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it will work. When we say work, it should fail actually. Okay, and why should it fail? Because we have broken the contract. There we are. Okay, let's just have a look what it's simply saying. It's saying contract verifier test has failed. It's saying I can't parse the JSON you have given because it has ID. Okay, it's saying doesn't match the JSON path, order ID equal to 1. So even before I could publish my changes to my consumer, when I'm running my unit tests, okay, as a provider, things have started to fail. So the feedback is really quick. So what I have to do now is I have to go back and revert my changes, because I shouldn't have done that without informing everybody. Everybody means all of my consumers. All right, good stuff. So let's see if I revert my changes, do I make my application or my unit tests happy or not? Beautiful. Okay, that's really nice stuff. So very simply, what you had to do, if you remember, you just had to write a contract, and you can create hundreds of contracts like this, yeah, with different combinations. Maybe sometime you want to make sure price is not coming null, order ID has this format, blah blah blah, all these things. The only thing, again, I'm just repeating myself, okay, because these things are very important. So apologies if I'm just keep on repeating myself. You don't have to write any Java code. The only thing you have to write in Java was the base class. After that, you just need and no more configuration. You just keep on dropping your contracts in this groovy format. Okay, so we're going to use the groovy DSL, okay, to build these contracts, and these contracts are very simple, just following the RESTful conventions basically. Yeah, you have request, URI, you have status, headers, whatever, and the body. Okay, now one more thing, if you remember what I said to you was, so as you can see, provider side all is good. Now what I really want to do is the second thing, I want to make my consumers life easier as well, i.e., I like to give them some sort of stub server so they can kind of consume my changes really quickly, run their unit test or little the offline integration test, and they can also be kind of feel confident that everything is working. Because sometimes what can happen is like maybe provider might make changes, consumer is not ready, or whatever. Okay, so one thing you probably will notice, if I take you back to the console, if I just do ls minus l, one thing you will notice is inside our target folder, okay, there is something called stub.jar. Stub.jar. It's nothing. I think it's some sort of WireMock based application. What we need to do is now we need to consume this stub.jar. Okay, let's see how to do that. So I'm going to close everything from provider side now. Now we need to focus on consumer. Okay, let's just close our provider. Now let's come to the consumer side. So on the consumer side, again, first thing we need to do is we need to add a Maven dependency for Spring Framework Cloud, and then we have to say Spring Cloud Starter, same contract, again up to here it's same, stub runner. Okay, so this is the step number 1 on the consumer side. Just give a scope equal to test, yeah, refresh everything, make sure dependency has been downloaded. That's the only change you have to make on the consumer side, nothing else you need to do. Okay, I'm going to close pom.xml. Now what we will do, if you remember, we already had a unit test. I already have a unit test over here. In this unit test, what I was doing, I was earlier, the expectation here was that every time I run, the server is running. But now we don't have to run the server. What we will have to do instead, you just have to write this particular code. Okay, sorry, I need to zoom in because you may not be able to read it otherwise. So the only annotation you have to add in your unit test, okay, in your Spring unit test, Spring Boot test, that auto configure stub runner. Inside that, you have to add 2 things. You have to say what is your stub mode. So you simply say stub runner properties dot stub mode dot local. Okay, I think I might be able to do the static import, so it makes it a bit easier. So stub mode is local. You can have remote, so so your stub might be running remotely somewhere. Another thing you need to do is you need to give the ID of your service provider. Where do you get all this stuff? You can go back to your provider pom.xml. You should be able to find all these details, like the group ID and the artifact ID, etc. And then you are simply saying :+ which means take the latest version of it, okay, whatever is available in your artifactory or wherever you get your dependencies from, and then run this stub runner on port 8080. You can run on any port, okay, because if you have a default port 8080, it might have a clash, you might be running something else. Over here I'm saying run on 8090. Okay, so I don't have any problem, and after that I will be able to run this unit test pretty much in an offline mode. I don't need any server running anywhere remotely. Okay, so if I run my unit test at this point, okay, so I'm running my unit test. What will happen at this point? There you go, my test is passing. Remember, if you notice in my IntelliJ, I am not running any server at the moment. The only thing I did is, and you can see WireMock was started. Okay, this is our stub server. So my stub is now provided by my provider, and I'm using this as my consumer. So if we go back to our presentation really quickly, this whole 360 loop is completed. Okay, producer is giving me data, consumer is enforcing the contract, producer is honoring that contract. In return, producer is also giving me stub, and the stub is consumed by consumer. I am able to test the producer API really quickly. I know, okay, if I'm using whatever version of producer API, it's going to work in production. All right, that's it. So that's what I wanted to show you today. Okay, so this is Spring Contract Testing or CDC. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit complex area. It takes a while to have your head around. Sometimes people ask, where do I put these contracts? Where do I run this stuff, everything? But if you listen to my video 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, however it takes, you will appreciate okay, that how easy it is to kind of implement contract testing or CDC. Also, you will kind of fully understand where to put your stuff, right? Okay. Thank you for watching, and happy coding. Okay, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.